Let us begin this story very slowly, because these first 3 chapters are extremely important. If you understand these 3 chapters properly, you will understand the basic foundation of the Vicar of Wakefield. This slide is called Phase 1, Prosperity and the Fall. The word phase simply means a stage or period in a story. So, in these first 3 chapters, Goldsmith shows us 2 completely different situations. At first, the Primrose family is happy, respectable, comfortable, and financially secure. Then, because of one mistake and one unfortunate event, everything begins to collapse. So we can remember the movement of these 3 chapters as prosperity to dispute to financial fall to relocation. Or, even more simply, happy family to family quarrel to fortune lost to new life begins. Let us now travel through the story step by step. First, let us understand the background. The central character of the novel is Dr. Charles Primrose. He is the Vicar of Wakefield, and he is the father of a large family. The word vicar means a clergyman or parish priest who looks after a church and its parishioners. So Dr. Primrose is not simply a father. He is also a religious and moral figure in the community. He considers himself a man of principles. He believes strongly in morality, religion, family values, honesty, and simplicity. But Goldsmith is going to test all these beliefs through life. And this is one of the important ideas we should keep in mind. It is easy to have strong principles when life is comfortable. The real test comes when suffering begins. That is exactly what happens to Dr. Primrose. Part 1. The Idyllic Parish. Now look at the first box on the slide, the idyllic parish. The word idyllic means extremely peaceful, pleasant, happy, and almost perfect. Imagine a beautiful village. There is a peaceful family home. There is a respected clergyman. The family has enough money. The children are growing up. There is love inside the household. There are hopes for the future. This is the atmosphere with which Goldsmith begins the novel. Dr. Primrose lives a comfortable and respectable life with his family. His family is large, and family relationships are extremely important throughout the novel. One of his sons is George Primrose. George is the eldest son. At this stage of the story, George is expected to marry Arabella Wilmot. So everything appears to be going perfectly. Let us imagine the situation like this. A father looks at his eldest son and thinks, "My son is going to marry a good young woman. My family is financially secure. My children have a bright future. Everything is going well." That is the emotional position of Dr. Primrose at the beginning. He feels that life is under control. But Goldsmith is preparing to show us how quickly that sense of security can disappear. Why is George's marriage important? George's proposed marriage to Arabella Wilmot is not merely a romantic detail. It represents family stability and social connection. The marriage would unite 2 families. George would have a future. The Primrose family would continue to enjoy social respectability. Therefore, when this marriage arrangement collapses, it becomes the first major crack in the family's happiness. And this brings us to the second box. Part 2. The Theological Dispute. Look at the middle box. It says, the theological dispute. Now, this is very interesting because the family's disaster does not begin with a huge battle or a dramatic crime. It begins with something apparently small, an argument. Dr. Primrose has a neighbor named Mr. Wilmot. Mr. Wilmot is Arabella's father. So remember, Dr. Primrose is George's father. Mr. Wilmot is Arabella's father. George and Arabella are supposed to marry. But Dr. Primrose and Mr. Wilmot have different opinions about marriage. Their discussion becomes an argument about monogamy and polygamy. Now, these words may sound difficult, so let us make them very simple. Monogamy means having one husband or one wife at a time. Polygamy means having more than one spouse. Dr. Primrose strongly supports monogamy. He believes that marriage should be between one man and one woman. Mr. Wilmot takes the opposite position. Instead of treating the disagreement as an intellectual conversation, both men become increasingly stubborn. And this is where Goldsmith begins to show us an important weakness in human nature. Sometimes the original subject of an argument is not the real problem. The real problem becomes pride. For example, imagine two friends discussing something very simple. One says, "I think this is right." The other says, "No, I think it is wrong." At first, it is simply a discussion. But after several minutes, both become determined to prove, "I must win." Now the issue is no longer the original question. It becomes, "I cannot allow the other person to defeat me." That is essentially what happens between Dr. Primrose and Mr. Wilmot. Their intellectual disagreement becomes a personal quarrel. And there is an important lesson here. A small disagreement can create a large consequence when pride replaces understanding. The effect of the argument. Now let us connect this argument to George and Arabella. George is supposed to marry Arabella, but their fathers are quarreling. Because of this dispute, the proposed marriage is broken off. So we have a chain of events. Theological disagreement leads to personal quarrel, which leads to broken marriage arrangement, which leads to family unhappiness. This is important because Goldsmith does not suddenly destroy the Primrose family. He allows one problem to lead naturally to another. That is how many tragedies and comic novels work. One mistake creates another problem. One emotional reaction produces another consequence. An important exam point. Students, remember this carefully. The argument is connected with the question of monogamy and polygamy. Dr. Primrose is a strong defender of monogamy. His excessive attachment to his own opinion contributes to the quarrel with Mr. Wilmot. Therefore, this scene is not simply about marriage. It also helps Goldsmith reveal the character of Dr. Primrose. He is intelligent and moral, but he can also be stubborn, opinionated, and impractical. This becomes important later in the novel. Goldsmith does not create a perfect hero. He creates a human being. Dr. Primrose has good qualities, but he also has weaknesses. And throughout the novel, life will teach him how to deal with those weaknesses. Part 3. The Ruin. Now we come to the third box. It says, "The Ruin." This is where the story takes a dramatic turn. Until this point, the Primrose family has been relatively comfortable. Now their financial security disappears. Dr. Primrose has placed his money in the hands of a merchant. Unfortunately, the merchant fails financially. As a result, Dr. Primrose loses his fortune. So suddenly, the family that was living comfortably becomes poor. This is an extremely important moment in the novel. Why? Because Goldsmith is changing the social and economic position of the entire family. They are no longer secure. They must leave their comfortable situation and begin again somewhere else. Let us understand the financial fall with a simple example. Suppose a family has savings of 10 lakh rupees. The family thinks, "We are safe. We can live comfortably." Now imagine that they give the money to a businessman for investment. The businessman fails. The family loses the money. Suddenly, the family cannot maintain the same lifestyle. They may have to sell things. They may have to move to a cheaper house. They may have to reduce their expenses. That is basically the emotional situation Goldsmith creates for the Primrose family. The important point is, their financial position changes almost completely. And this is why the title of this phase is Prosperity and the Fall. At the beginning, prosperity. By the end of chapter 3, fall. The family's change of location. Because of their financial difficulties, the Primrose family has to leave its former comfortable surroundings. They move to a much humbler place associated with Squire Thornhill. This is extremely important because the move changes the environment of the story. Think of it like this. At the beginning, the family is living in a relatively secure and respectable environment. Then suddenly, money disappears. Security disappears. Social comfort disappears. And the family is forced to begin again. This movement from prosperity to poverty is not only a physical movement. It is also a social and psychological movement. They have to learn how to live without the comforts they previously enjoyed. Now look at the fortune tracker. At the bottom of the slide, we have something called the fortune tracker. This is one of the easiest ways to understand the first 3 chapters. Imagine the graph as a picture of the family's financial condition. At the beginning, the line is high. That represents high fortune. The family is comfortable. They have wealth. They have social respectability. They have hopes for the future. Then we reach the point marked, dispute begins. The line begins to fall. The dispute itself is not the direct financial cause of the family's poverty, but it represents the beginning of instability in the story. Then the line continues downward. Finally, we reach fortune lost. This represents the financial disaster. So the graph gives us a visual summary of the story. We can think of it as high fortune to conflict to financial collapse. Why does Goldsmith begin the novel with prosperity? This is a very important literary question. Why not simply begin with a poor family? Why show us a wealthy or comfortable family first? Because the contrast becomes much stronger. If we see someone who has always been poor, poverty is their normal condition. But if we first see a family enjoying comfort and then watch them lose everything, we feel the change much more strongly. For example, imagine two people. Person A has always lived in a small house. Person B has lived in a large comfortable house for 20 years and suddenly loses it. The second person's experience of loss is psychologically more dramatic. Goldsmith uses this contrast to make us understand the Primrose family's fall. Dr. Primrose as a father. Let us now focus on Dr. Primrose himself. He is deeply attached to his family. He wants his children to have good futures. He wants George to marry Arabella. He wants his family to live morally. He wants to maintain his dignity. But he is not always practical. This is one of the most important characteristics of Dr. Primrose. He is a good man, but goodness does not automatically mean wisdom. A person can be honest but impractical, loving but stubborn, religious but sometimes foolish, generous but financially careless. Goldsmith creates humor from exactly these contradictions. That is why Dr. Primrose becomes such an interesting narrator. He is telling the story, but he does not always understand his own mistakes immediately. The importance of the family. Another major point in these chapters is the importance of the family unit. The Primrose family is not presented as a collection of separate individuals. Their lives are interconnected. One person's decision affects everyone. Dr. Primrose's argument affects George. The financial failure affects the entire household. The broken marriage arrangement affects both families. This is a recurring pattern in the novel. The family experiences happiness together, and later, they experience suffering together. Therefore, the family becomes one of the central emotional structures of the novel. The movement from order to chaos. There is another way to understand these three chapters. At the beginning, there is order. The family has a home, a stable income, a social position, a marriage plan, a sense of security. Then gradually, that order breaks down. The marriage arrangement is damaged. The relationship between the families becomes hostile. The fortune disappears. The family has to move. So we can represent the entire phase as order, conflict, disorder. This pattern is very common in literature. A story often begins with a stable world. Then something disturbs that stability. The characters must struggle to rebuild their lives. That is exactly what Goldsmith is beginning to do here. The word, fall, is very important. Now let us pay attention to the word, fall, in the slide title. Fall does not mean only falling financially. There are several kinds of falling here. First, there is a financial fall. The family loses its fortune. Second, there is a social fall. The family cannot maintain the same comfortable social position. Third, there is a family disturbance. The expected marriage between George and Arabella is broken. Fourth, there is an emotional fall. The family moves from confidence and happiness toward uncertainty and anxiety. So the word, fall, has a wider meaning. It describes the collapse of the comfortable world Dr. Primrose believed he possessed. A simple story recap. Let us now tell the entire slide as one simple story. Imagine Dr. Primrose at the beginning. He is a respected clergyman. He has a loving family. His family is financially comfortable. His eldest son, George, is expected to marry Arabella Wilmot. Dr. Primrose believes everything is going well. Then he has an argument with Arabella's father, Mr. Wilmot. The argument is about marriage, especially monogamy and polygamy. Instead of peacefully agreeing to disagree, the two men become angry. Their relationship breaks down. As a result, George and Arabella's proposed marriage is also broken off. But this is only the beginning. Dr. Primrose then suffers a much more serious problem. The merchant handling his money fails financially. Dr. Primrose loses his fortune. The family that once lived comfortably is suddenly poor. They cannot continue living in the same way. They have to relocate, and now the Primrose family enters a completely different stage of life. The peaceful beginning is over. The real adventure of the novel is about to begin. Why this slide matters for exams. For competitive examinations such as UGC NET, SET, PGTRB, UGTRB, GATE, and university examinations, do not simply memorize the pictures. Understand the sequence. Remember, Chapter 1, Comfortable Family Life and the Planned Marriage of George and Arabella. Chapter 2, The Dispute Between Dr. Primrose and Mr. Wilmot concerning monogamy and polygamy. Chapter 3, Financial Disaster and the Family's Movement to a Humbler Situation. The most important conceptual movement is prosperity dispute, broken marriage arrangement, financial loss, relocation.